Ace Frehley's final night, the guitar, God's last encore. It was supposed to be an ordinary night, a concert, a crowd, a stage bathed in blinding lights. But before the final note faded, something had already gone terribly wrong. The audience at the packed theater didn't notice it at first. They were too lost in the moment, too hypnotized by the familiar roar of Ace Frehley's guitar, the sound that had once shaken stadiums, that had defined an era of rock and rebellion. For decades, Ace wasn't just a musician. He was a symbol, the face-painted spaceman of Kiss, the man who turned distortion into poetry, chaos into rhythm. But behind that wild grin and the electrifying solos lay a man who had fought too many inner wars, against addiction, loneliness, and the ghosts of his own past. That night was meant to be a celebration, a revival of the rock legend's magic. But fate had other plans. As the final set began, something seemed off. Witnesses recall that Frehley appeared pale, distant, distracted. His usual spark dimmed. Some thought it was exhaustion, others believed it was emotion. A few close friends later admitted he had been unusually quiet before going on stage, saying only, "Let's make this one count." It was a phrase that would echo painfully in the hours to come. When the concert ended, fans screamed his name, begging for one more song. He smiled faintly, gave his signature thumbs up, and walked off stage for what would unknowingly be the last time. Moments later, backstage, he collapsed. Panic spread like wildfire. Technicians rushed to his aid, calling for medical help as paramedics pushed through the chaos. The hall that had just been roaring with music now stood silent, except for the muffled sounds of confusion and disbelief. By the time he was taken to the hospital, it was too late. Ace Frehley, the man who had once set stages ablaze, was gone. News broke within hours, flooding every platform, every timeline, every fan forum. Shock turned into mourning, disbelief into heartbreak. For millions, it didn't feel real. Ace had been the embodiment of endurance, the guitarist who had survived car crashes, addictions, and decades of rock and roll madness. To think that his final note had already been played was almost impossible to accept. In the following days, the investigation began. The official statement was simple: cardiac arrest. But that explanation didn't satisfy everyone. Rumors began to swirl, whispers of stress, exhaustion, maybe even betrayal. Those closest to him spoke of the mounting pressures, the endless touring, and the toll it had taken. One crew member anonymously confessed, "He looked tired, man, like he was carrying the whole past on his shoulders." But others suggested something darker, that Ace had been facing hidden struggles that no one wanted to talk about. That behind the smiles and the comeback shows there were fears, regrets, and shadows he could never quite escape. When the day of the funeral arrived, the world seemed to pause. The ceremony was held in a small private chapel in New York, the city where Kiss had been born, where Ace's legend had begun. Outside, hundreds gathered in silence, holding candles, guitars, and vinyl covers. The crowd was a mix of generations, gray-haired fans who had followed him since the 70s and young dreamers who had only known him through streaming playlists. But all of them shared the same heartbreak. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with sorrow. The coffin, simple yet elegant, rested at the front surrounded by white lilies and a single black guitar, the one Ace had often referred to as his first love. Friends and fellow musicians stepped forward, one by one, to pay their respects. Paul Stanley's voice trembled as he spoke. "We started as kids, just trying to make music that mattered. And Ace, he made it matter. He was wild, unpredictable, but brilliant. And deep down, he cared more than he ever showed." Gene Simmons stood silently for a long moment before saying, "Ace was more than a guitarist. He was energy. He was light. Sometimes that light burned too bright, but it never truly went out." Tears fell freely as fans outside began singing "New York Groove," the song that had once revived his solo career. Their voices echoed down the street, haunting yet beautiful, a chorus of love and farewell. But not everyone inside the church was calm. Tension rose when whispers spread that some people, perhaps even within his circle, knew more than they were saying. A few believed the exhaustion story didn't fit, that something deeper had been buried with him. Security had to escort away a few individuals who began shouting questions during the service. It was chaos wrapped in grief. Still, through the confusion, one thing remained certain. Ace Frehley had touched lives in ways that few artists ever could. He wasn't perfect. He was human. Beautifully, tragically human. And maybe that's what made him so unforgettable. Later that evening, as the hearse began its slow journey through the city streets, thousands lined the sidewalks, waving goodbye with tears and cheers. Candles flickered in the rain. Some fans held guitars aloft, others raised old concert tickets like relics. The procession stopped briefly near Madison Square Garden, the site of so many of his legendary performances, where the driver paused, letting the silence speak louder than any song ever could. In the days that followed, tributes poured in from around the world. Musicians, celebrities, and fans flooded social media with stories. How Ace's music had saved them, inspired them, given them courage. "He made space feel closer," wrote one fan. "He made rock feel infinite." But even as the tributes flowed, questions remained. Why did he seem so distant before his final show? Was it truly just exhaustion, or had the weight of decades finally caught up to him? The answers may never come. Perhaps they're buried with him, beneath the same soil that now holds his guitar-shaped tombstone. Weeks later, at a quiet memorial gathering, one of his old friends summed it up best. Ace didn't just play guitar, he spoke through it. Every riff was a confession, every solo a piece of his soul. Maybe that's why he left the way he did. On stage, doing what he loved, burning until the last note. And maybe that's what he would have wanted. No headlines, no drama, just the music. In the end, Ace Frehley wasn't just a man from the Bronx who made it big. He was the embodiment of rebellion, of freedom, of sound turned into emotion. His legacy isn't just in records or fame. It's in the countless kids who picked up a guitar and believed they could be somebody. He once said in an interview, "Music is like space, endless, mysterious, and beautiful. You never really leave it. You just drift into another song." And perhaps, somewhere out there, Ace is still playing, his guitar echoing through the stars, his riffs lighting up the dark, reminding us all that legends never truly die. They just fade into the next great silence. If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Subscribe for more true stories behind the legends, the music, the mystery, and the moments that never fade. Because every legend leaves a sound behind, and we're here to keep it alive.